It was a November afternoon in Chicago. Donald Trump, clad in a long blue-black coat and red tie, strolled down Michigan Avenue. He was in town for a meeting but had decided to walk back to his hotel to take in the city's energy. As he passed a corner near Millennium Park, something made him pause. On the sidewalk, sitting hunched against the building, was a woman. Her clothes were old and tattered, and her hands trembled as she held a cardboard sign that read, "Veteran in need, please help." Trump paused, his steps faltering as he was momentarily taken aback by the scene before him. Amidst the noise of the bustling city, with people rushing by, he found himself drawn to a woman sitting alone, her tired, weathered eyes filled with a quiet sorrow. It was as though, for a moment, the chaos of the world had faded away, leaving only her in his focus. Without a second thought, he made his way toward her, the crowd continuing its hurried pace, unaware of the encounter unfolding in their midst. As he approached, people glanced curiously in his direction, but he paid them no mind. His attention was entirely on the woman, sitting on the pavement, wrapped in a faded coat that seemed too thin for the cold. "Ma'am," Trump said, his voice steady but soft, "what's your name?" The woman, who had been staring down at her hands, looked up in surprise. She hadn't expected anyone to stop, much less someone as famous as Donald Trump. Her eyes widened, a mix of disbelief and caution in her gaze. "It's Teresa," she replied, her voice hesitant, almost unsure of the reality of the moment. Trump's brow furrowed slightly. "Teresa Hensley?" he asked, the name now hanging in the air between them. "Yes, sir," she answered, a slight quiver in her voice. "Homeless veteran woman. I served in the Army for 12 years, got injured overseas, and, well, things haven't been easy since." Trump nodded, his expression becoming more somber as he absorbed her words. The weight of her story seemed to settle in the space between them, and he took a moment to process the gravity of her circumstances. Despite the grandiosity of his world, this was real, raw, and human. "Why are you out here? Don't you have a place to stay?" Trump asked, his voice tinged with concern as he studied the woman in front of him. His words, though simple, carried an undertone of disbelief, as though the very idea of someone in her position seemed impossible. Teresa, her shoulders slumped in exhaustion, shook her head slowly. Her face, weathered by the harsh realities of life on the streets, told a story of quiet struggle. "I lost my apartment months ago," she explained, her voice low and weary. "Couldn't keep up with the rent. Been trying to get back on my feet, but it's hard. I don't have anywhere else to go." Her words struck Trump harder than he anticipated, a painful jolt running through him. Here was a woman who had given over a decade of her life to serve this country, now reduced to this, sitting on a street corner, alone, forgotten by a system that should have taken care of her. It didn't sit right with him. He couldn't just stand there and do nothing. Without hesitation, Trump reached into his pocket, pulling out his phone. He looked at Teresa, his resolve firming up. "Teresa, stay right here," he said. "We're gonna fix this." Trump moved a few steps away, dialed a number, and waited as the phone rang. On the other end, his trusted assistant, Margaret, picked up immediately, sensing the urgency in his tone. "Margaret," Trump said without preamble, his words sharp and quick, "I need you to find the nearest hotel with availability, preferably somewhere close. And call a doctor, someone who can do a quick checkup. Tell them it's urgent, that I need this handled fast." "Right away, Mr. Trump," Margaret responded, the efficiency in her voice clear. Trump ended the call, his eyes still on Teresa. He walked back to her, her gaze a mix of confusion and cautious hope, as if she wasn't quite sure whether she could trust the offer of help that was being extended to her. "Help is on the way," he told her gently, offering her a reassuring smile. "But first, let's get you something warm to eat. I know it's not much, but we'll start there." For a moment, the harshness of the world seemed to fade away, replaced by the simple kindness of a stranger who, despite all odds, still believed in making a difference. He flagged down a food vendor nearby and bought Teresa a steaming bowl of soup and a sandwich. She ate slowly, her hands shaking from the cold. As she ate, Trump asked her about her life, her time in the Army, her family, and how she ended up here. Teresa told him about her deployments, the friends she had lost, and the injury that had ended her career. She spoke of how the transition to civilian life had been tougher than she had imagined. Minutes later, a sleek black SUV pulled up to the curb. Margaret had worked fast. A well-dressed driver stepped out, holding open the door. "Teresa," Trump said gently, helping her to her feet. "This is for you. We're taking you somewhere safe." Teresa hesitated. "Why are you doing this, Mr. Trump? You don't even know me." Trump looked her in the eye. "Because someone should have done it a long time ago." The SUV whisked them away to a nearby luxury hotel. The staff, prepped by Margaret, greeted Teresa like a VIP. She was escorted to a suite on the top floor, where a hot shower, fresh clothes, and a warm bed awaited her. A doctor arrived soon after to examine Teresa, providing medicine for her ailments and advice on how to regain her health. Trump stayed nearby, making sure everything was handled smoothly. Meanwhile, Margaret had contacted Veterans United Support Services, a nonprofit that specialized in helping homeless veterans reintegrate into society. Within the hour, their representative, a cheerful woman named Lisa, arrived to meet Teresa. "Teresa," Lisa said softly, sitting down beside her on the worn bench, her voice full of warmth and compassion. "We're gonna help you. We're gonna help you with housing, job training, and anything else you need. You're not alone anymore. You have people who care, people who will stand by you every step of the way." Teresa's eyes shimmered, the weight of her years on the streets finally starting to lift, even if just a little. The tears welled up in her eyes, but she fought to hold them back. She had grown so used to facing the world alone, to thinking she had to carry her burdens in silence. But now, for the first time in a long while, there was a flicker of hope, a light breaking through the darkness she'd lived in for so long. She looked at Trump, who stood in the corner, quietly observing, his arms folded in a way that was both commanding and gentle. She swallowed hard, trying to find the words that seemed to elude her. "I don't know how to thank you, Mr. Trump," she said, her voice a mixture of awe and gratitude. This is more than I could have ever dreamed." Trump stepped forward, his expression softening. There was a depth in his eyes, a kind of understanding that went beyond words. He placed a hand on her shoulder, his voice steady and sincere. "You don't need to thank me, Teresa. You earned this a long time ago. You served this country with honor, and now it's time for you to be taken care of. You've already given more than anyone could ask." The sincerity of his words left Teresa speechless. For years, she had wondered if anyone would ever see her as more than just a homeless veteran. And now, here she was, seen, acknowledged, and offered a path forward. By the next morning, Teresa's life had already begun to change. Veterans United had secured temporary housing for her, a safe place where she could start to rebuild. But that wasn't all. Trump, through his foundation, had arranged to cover her rent for the first year, ensuring that she wouldn't have to worry about that vital aspect of her new beginning. As if that wasn't enough, he handed her a check for immediate expenses, a gesture that took away some of the immediate pressure she'd been carrying for so long. Her heart swelled with gratitude, but there was a sense of disbelief too. How could someone like him, be willing to give so much for a stranger, someone who had never been part of his world? The thought was overwhelming, and yet here she was, holding the hope of a new start. As Trump prepared to leave, his footsteps echoing softly in the room, Teresa stood up, her voice steadier now, her resolve clearer. She knew this moment was a turning point in her life, but she also knew she had to say something. "Mr. Trump," she said, her voice firm yet filled with emotion, "you've changed my life in ways I can't even begin to describe. You've given me more than I ever thought was possible. Thank you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart." Trump paused, turning back to face her. A small smile tugged at the corners of his mouth, a mixture of pride and encouragement in his eyes. "Teresa, you're going to do great things. I have no doubt about that. But there's one thing I need you to promise me." Her brows furrowed slightly. "What's that?" "Pay it forward," Trump said, his voice taking on a more serious tone. "Once you get back on your feet, once you're in a position to help others, you pay it forward. Help someone else who's been through what you've been through. It's not just about you, it's about making a difference for others, too." Teresa nodded, the weight of his words sinking in. She hadn't been able to think that far ahead, But now, for the first time, she saw the bigger picture. "Someday, I will," she said, her voice filled with a newfound determination. "I promise." And with that, Trump turned and walked out, leaving Teresa standing there with the beginnings of a future that just hours before had seemed impossible. She wasn't just going to survive anymore. She was going to thrive, and one day she would make sure others had the same chance to do the same. As Trump walked out of the hotel and back into the bustling city, he felt a quiet sense of satisfaction. In a matter of hours, one life had been transformed. And for Teresa Hensley, the future suddenly looked bright. This brings us to the end of this story. Thank you for watching till the end. I hope you enjoyed the story. If you did, don't hesitate to like the video, share it with your friends, subscribe to our channel, and turn on the notification bell for more fascinating stories. Have a nice day.